So, Adrian, what level will you be talking about?
Tonight I'll be talking about Stage 7.
Alright. Where does this stage take place?
This one is in a watery cave.
It looks like the level would be most easily segmented by the platforms, and you might have like a challenge or two between the platforms, but mostly the level is moving from one segment of spiked land to the next.
Yep. So when you start the level, you jump over your fire and then you have to avoid the two crumbling stalactites that are shortly behind it. Easy to get away from, you can quickly land on the ground and run right under them, kind of like Thwomps in Mario. It's the section after that you come across the spider moving up and down slowly, which oddly enough actually makes that more challenging because he's so slow. So in this level, it's not only just about maintaining your vertical position, but also your horizontal position, because some of the enemies, because they're so slow, your opportunity to move past them can go away if you don't move ahead of time. So you can't just hang on the back of the screen. You kind of need to move forward a little bit and then go back again slowly after the spider, because that's when you get the fireball who's going to jump straight into you if you hang on the front of the screen too long. So this level is going to have you moving left and right more so than the other stages for that reason, in addition to up and down.
How are the balloons laid out in this level?
You will typically see the balloons laid out in such a way that you're going to be basically within a tile away from the spikes on the ceiling, minus a couple in the beginning of the stage, and the ones that the little sparrows circle around. Those ones, they're like dead center in the screen, nowhere near the spikes, but you still have to get them without getting your balloons popped.
Right, in that case, you're not a tile away from the spikes, but a tile away from the sparrow.
Right. But otherwise, that appears to be the trend for most of the level, getting you to move on the literal cutting edge of the spikes. And then shortly past those two sparrows is the octopus. So if you are sort of in a rush and you try to go past and you get that remaining balloon there, you might accidentally bump into the octopus that's right to the left of him.
Right, there are very few clean resets in this level.
This next section is actually the sharpest curve in the tunnel. You go up and you have to make I'd say this is a 45-degree curve. So you have to make sure to go up and then fall in just the right way and fast enough too, so that none of the spikes that fall from the ceiling hit you and that you don't overshoot and land in the water, as I just saw what happened right here in your video of it.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's easier to go balloonless for that portion. Go balloonless, jump off, and then gravity affects you much more quickly. Also, you don't need to flap to adjust your horizontal momentum when you're just going balloonless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you still have mid-air control when you're balloonless, more so than if you had a balloon, where you would have to flap every time. Yeah, so you can probably short hop that. So after the sharp drop, in order to get with the balloons, you naturally want to go up quick enough to both avoid the fire, but also not too high in order to get the balloons. This section is much wider though, so it's much easier than that steep drop you had to deal with earlier. Same with the spider challenge here, there's much more space to move around. Same with the octopus and the spider following him. So in this next section, you actually encounter these rocks that behave differently from the other rocks. They fall down and then they break into four.
The nuts in stage 2 do that, right?
I think they do. So yeah, what it means is that you need to be careful to stay high, naturally to avoid the fire, but also to avoid the debris that comes after it shatters on the ground. Of course, even if it does, if you are hanging a bit too low to the ground and pops your balloons, there's enough time to get at least one to jump over the fire, so the auto scroll won't drag you into it. Even though you can jump over it, refill, and then move on. Past that, you're in what is your 1, 2, 3, fourth section, where you go through a passage that has spikes on the top and the bottom. This time you have the circly bird, and because of the way he moves, this is another example of what I mean about picking your moments of when to move ahead. So if you're like hanging too close to the top, he's eventually going to bump into you, unless you're like that freaking pixel perfect that you can manage that one tile space. but otherwise you need to both control your vertical position and move ahead with the proper timing. Otherwise he is going to ruin your day. Now we actually finally get to the only bonus stage in this room. The trick is to just wait for the rocks to fall, fly up. You can't actually see it on the screen, but if you suspect that there's something up there, yeah, that's how you get your bonus stage.
So, do you know if the bumper is strong enough to send you up into that Game Boy?
Yeah, I just tried it then, and you can actually get into the bonus level by bouncing off the bumper.
And you get into your final stretch of spikes on top and bottom. It's not as sharp as the one I mentioned earlier, but this time you have more complicated moving enemies. So you have 3 of those birds this time, and you're also going to be going a much further distance than the other ones before you hit safe ground, or in this case, the end of the stage.
What I noticed about a couple of the Sparrow challenges is that most of the balloons in the game are at different horizontal positions, so that you can easily trace a path forward through the level and adjust your vertical position to get the balloons. But here you have 2 balloons really close to each other horizontally, but distant vertically. So it's tricky to maintain your position with the auto-scrolling and make sure to grab both.
Yeah.
What do you think of that transition at the end? Does that communicate a factory to you?
No, it does not.
What are the enemies like in this level?
So a lot of the enemies here are enemies that we've seen before. I think one fire enemy, it's not to be confused with the other one that walks on the grounds, because these ones actually jump and move at the same time. The birds that fly in circles, the octopuses that jump up and down.
So it seems like there's a lot of different lines of motion there. It's not like there's any particular theme that runs through them.
The only thing they're missing is an enemy that just moves straight across the screen. Otherwise, most of the enemies here are going up and down in some way. But yeah, nothing that just moves straight, from left to right in the screen.
Right.
I think there's actually a really good reason for that, and that is because the level itself creates the undulations in the player's trajectory.
Because the platforms move up and down. Or they don't move, but the curvature of the level.
And their spikes as well. So they have a similar effect, except that if it were just an enemy, so moving past, then you could also move underneath or whatnot, but you can't actually move through the walled area.
Right.
Right.
So, if I was to describe the theme for this level, is that this is a level that has you moving more gingerly than other levels, and tests your ability to move up, but not too far up, and moving down, but not too far down, because in this level, like the other ones with spikes, has them both on the top and the bottom. So it's not like other levels where you could sort of float around the water and then maybe get away from the fish in time. It's like, no, if you go too far down, you are screwed. You die.
Right. It's especially tricky when you have the fire jumping up towards you.
Yep.
Daniel, do you have any thoughts on this stage?
Well, I certainly do, Greg. If in that last challenge your balloons get popped by the blackbirds or the bats and you fall onto the spikes, but because you took a hit, you're still flashing for a little bit, if you actually just stay on a spike and you then start pumping up your balloons, when the flashing stops, sometimes you can still stand on the spike and not take any damage. So it's actually possible to do a cheap trick there.
Are you saying that if you have invincibility time and land on a spike, that when the invincibility time is out, you don't die?
It seems to be the case
There were some weird times where I can't point to anything as specifically as Daniel, but there were weird times in this stage where I felt like I was standing somewhere I shouldn't have been.
Well, I had that feeling in lots of scenarios outside of the game.
Another interesting tidbit actually is that there's no fish that jumps out of the water in this level. It's actually a frog.
Oh my god, I didn't see that.
But yeah, in terms of the design, we can see that trend where, like in this level, it's very different to the initial levels where it's highly restrictive. It's still interesting actually that even though it is highly, highly restricted and it does have those very odd angles that you have to move through, that there is still a decent amount of freedom in terms of the way that you can adjust your timings or move through different spaces based on the enemy movements.
Mm-hmm.
Because the scrolling speed is slow enough and enemy cycles are short enough that they loop through whatever they're going to do and you can approach it at any given timing of the screen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well said. So in a way it maintains that initial freedom while still increasing the difficulty by restricting the space. So increasing time but restricting space instead.
Okay. Yourself, do you have any thoughts?
I don't know if you're being sarcastic or what, but this stage is really easy. This is like the plays itself stage, I thought, of the latter half of the game.
Now, I feel differently where Stage 8 is tough, but I feel like I can get a grasp on it, whereas Stage 7 always makes me feel queasy.
Stage 8, I think, has a lot of pretty tight technical challenges where you really need to have a close handle on your movement, whereas I don't think that that's really the case in Stage 7. I think maybe part of it, especially in comparison to Stage 8, is that the ceiling being spikes only pops a balloon. So there's a fair amount of leniency built into that challenge there by comparison to the sparks that you see in some of the other stages that are instant kills no matter where they hit you.
So as a contrast, the sparks move along one axis. I think some might shoot diagonally from the light bulbs, but the light bulbs are easy to avoid anyway. Whereas the bats move in a circle, the fires are jumping vertically and horizontally and have like a sense of gravity, and even the terrain of the level itself is uneven and hard to read.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting, I guess. I never would have thought anyone would say this stage is hard. It didn't really even occur to me.